Finally, she said the truth. Every case has a turning point. And in the disappearance of baby Emmanuel Haro, that moment came not in a courtroom, not in an interrogation room, but in the quiet reactions of his own mother, Rebecca. When she stood before cameras, her words were few, but her pauses, her nervous glances, and the weight behind her silence spoke volumes. She didn't need to point a finger. Her body language already had. It was as if she carried a secret too dangerous to name outright, but one she could no longer completely hide. Jake Haro had a past, dark, violent, and already written into court records. But this time, when the lies fell apart, the world began asking a chilling question. Did Rebecca know all along? Did she see the warning signs, hear the cries, and still choose silence? On DetectiveMax, we're not just telling the story of a child taken too soon. We're uncovering the layers of silence, guilt, and hidden truths that surrounded Emmanuel's short life. Because sometimes, the most revealing confession isn't spoken at all. It's written in the face of someone who knows the truth and can no longer keep it buried. But before we dive into this, kindly subscribe to our channel if you believe in fighting for justice. Because every view, every comment, every subscriber is a stand against silence and a step toward justice. We've just crossed 5,000 subscribers, all because of your support, and we need that same energy to reach 6,000, then 7,000, and then 10,000. So go ahead and drop your fingerprints on that subscribe button, and definitely where you watching from, because wherever you are, the day this vision is fulfilled, I will send my appreciation straight to you. Let's keep building this community that stands and fights for justice together. When the cameras turned to Rebecca Haro, her silence said more than her words. Was it fear or was it guilt? Tonight's story carries a title that chills us all. Rebecca Haro finally revealed Jake's secret. But make no mistake, this was not a revelation spoken in a courtroom or shouted to reporters. It was a revelation whispered in silence, revealed in trembling glances, and in the weight she carried every time her husband's name was spoken. Yesterday, we uncovered how the neighbors' voices, once silent, finally broke through, refusing to stay low any longer. And with that, the truth began to crack open. Today, we take it further. Because every whisper, every testimony, every uneasy glance tells us one thing: we are closer than ever to the end of this story. Justice is no longer just a hope. It is moving toward Emmanuel. And if you stay with me until the very end of this video, you will see how the pieces, long hidden in silence, now point to a conclusion no one can deny. The walls are closing in, the secrets are unraveling, and justice shall prevail. Rebecca's subtle reactions told a story of their own. The shifting eyes, the lips pressed tight, the hesitation between sentences, each moment suggested she was holding back something too heavy to release. Something she knew, something she lived with, something she could not say out loud. And so, we begin, not with a crime scene, not with evidence bags, but with a silence that spoke louder than any confession. Because in this case, guilt was not only in the actions of one man, it was written across the face of the woman who stood beside him. On August 14, 2025, the world was told a frightening story. Rebecca Haro claimed she had been attacked in a parking lot while changing her son Emmanuel's diaper. In the confusion, she said her 7-month-old baby was taken. The announcement of a kidnapping spread like wildfire. Amber alerts went out. Flyers were printed. Communities rallied together, searching fields, streets, and highways in the desperate hope of bringing Emmanuel home. For days, neighbors searched with flashlights and dogs, clinging to hope. But behind the scenes, investigators began to notice cracks. The timeline didn't add up. Witnesses in the parking lot remembered nothing unusual, and Rebecca's own version of events began to shift under pressure. Within days, the heartbreaking truth emerged. There had been no stranger in the parking lot, no masked abductor waiting in the shadows. It was all a story, a cover that hid something much darker. Emmanuel's disappearance wasn't the work of a stranger. It came from within his own home. And when the hoax unraveled, the spotlight turned sharply onto the people at the center of the storm. Not just Jake, with his violent past already recorded in court files, but Rebecca too, the mother who carried the story, who stood in front of the cameras, and whose silence seemed to echo louder than her words. When the cameras shifted toward Rebecca Haro, the world expected to see a mother demanding answers, pleading for her baby's safe return. But what unfolded told a different story. Her eyes often drifted away from reporters. She hesitated before answering simple questions. At times she appeared emotional, her voice shaking, but just as quickly, she withdrew into silence. It was as though she was torn between two truths, the one she spoke out loud, and the one she carried inside. A mother who truly lost her child cries out for answers. But Rebecca, she held back, as if protecting someone, or hiding something. Her body language became a story in itself. The nervous glances, the quiet pauses, the heavy moments of silence suggested a deeper knowledge, one that weighed heavily on her, but that she could not bring herself to say. And that raises the question investigators and the public could not ignore. Did Rebecca know more about Jake's past than she let on? Did she see the signs, understand the risks, yet choose silence instead of action? Because the truth is, silence can protect the wrong person, and in this case, that silence may have cost Emmanuel his chance at life. Long before Emmanuel's disappearance, there were already warnings written in Jake Haro's past. In 2023, Jake was convicted in a case involving his infant daughter. The child suffered life-changing injuries, and while the court recognized the seriousness of the abuse, Jake was not sent to prison. Instead, he was given probation and work release. That decision is now one of the most haunting parts of this case, because probation gave Jake his freedom, and that freedom gave Emmanuel no chance. Rebecca was there through it all. She knew the court records, she knew the history, and still she stayed. She defended him. She built a family with him. And here is where silence becomes its own kind of betrayal. Rebecca stood by Jake then. She stands by him now. But silence in the face of suffering is not loyalty. It is complicity. The truth is, Emmanuel never had the protection he needed. And while Jake's past should have been a warning loud enough to shake the walls of any home, it was met with silence. A silence that may have cost Emmanuel everything. Rebecca wasn't an outsider looking in. She lived with Jake. She saw him every day. She knew his moods, his temper, and his past. If Emmanuel showed signs of pain, Rebecca was the one who changed his diapers, soothed his cries, and carried him in her arms. She would have been the first to notice bruises, to see the patterns, to understand that something wasn't right. Prosecutors now believe Emmanuel endured mistreatment before his death. And that leaves us with a painful question. How much did Rebecca know? If Rebecca knew, then every diaper change, every cry, every mark on his small body became part of a secret too heavy for any mother to bear. Yet she bore it, day after day, until Emmanuel was gone. The silence she carried wasn't just a mother's grief. It was the silence of someone who had already seen too much, who understood the truth more deeply than her words would allow. And in that silence lies the greatest betrayal, a choice not to protect the one who needed her most. The most painful part of this case isn't only what happened to Emmanuel, it's the silence that surrounded him. Rebecca, a mother, chose to shield her partner instead of protecting her child. And the world can't help but ask, why didn't she stop him? Why didn't she speak up before it was too late? The truth is chilling. Rebecca may not have struck the blow, but she carried the silence that killed. When she appeared in court, her demeanor spoke volumes. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't searching for answers. Instead, she looked weary, as though carrying the weight of knowledge she could never admit. To many, it seemed less like the face of a mother demanding justice, and more like the face of someone who knew the truth all along. And that truth, the one she never spoke out loud, now lingers as guilt that cannot be erased. In every investigation, there comes a moment when the mask begins to slip. For Rebecca Haro, that moment did not come with a sudden confession or a dramatic outburst. It came quietly, in the pauses, in the body language, in the way her presence seemed to change whenever Jake's name was spoken. Reporters noticed it, investigators noticed it, and the public, watching closely, began to sense it too. Rebecca never looked directly into the camera when the hardest questions were asked. When she was pressed about her husband's past, her eyes fell downward, her hands tightened, her voice broke for only a second, and then she fell silent. It wasn't what she said that mattered. It was what she couldn't bring herself to say. At times she appeared on the verge of breaking, as though she wanted to speak the truth, but knew that if she did, it would shatter everything around her. At other times, she looked almost rehearsed, clinging to the same story, repeating the same denials, even as the evidence crumbled. But no matter how carefully she tried to hold it together, her reactions betrayed her. This was the turning point. The moment when the public realized that Rebecca's silence wasn't just grief. It was knowledge. Knowledge she carried every day in that house. Knowledge she could not erase, no matter how many times she stood by Jake's side. Sometimes, secrets are not spoken. They are revealed in the trembling of lips that cannot finish a sentence, in the long pauses where words should be, in the eyes that cannot meet the truth head-on. And that is how Rebecca revealed Jake's secret, not by testifying against him, not by pointing a finger, but by showing the world through her own guilt, that she already knew. Her silence became louder than any statement. Her hesitation became its own confession. And in that moment, the world stopped seeing her as just a mother in mourning, and started seeing her as someone who carried a truth too heavy to speak. The tragedy of Emmanuel Haro cannot be placed on two people alone. Yes, Jake carried his past with him, and yes, Rebecca stood by in silence. But when we look deeper, the guilt spreads far wider. In 2023, a court already knew Jake's history. They knew he had hurt a child before. The evidence was there. The warnings were clear. And still, instead of prison, he walked free on probation. That decision gave him freedom, but it also gave Emmanuel no chance at safety. The justice system failed this child long before his story ever made headlines. And that failure is written into the outcome of this case. But the courts were not the only ones who remained silent. Neighbors had their suspicions. Friends had their questions. Some even whispered concerns. But few took action. Adults who might have known fragments of the truth looked away, convincing themselves it wasn't their place to speak. And so, Emmanuel's cries went unheard. Not just inside his home, but outside of it too. When Emmanuel died, it was not only at the hands of his parents. It was at the hands of a system, and the silence that refused to protect him. This is the guilt that lingers far beyond one family. It is a reminder that when we choose silence, we choose risk. When we look away, we leave children unprotected. And in Emmanuel's case, the silence of many became the burden of one innocent life. In the end, Emmanuel's story is not just about one crime, one lie, or one courtroom battle. It is about silence. Silence in a home, silence in a courtroom, silence in a community. Rebecca Haro may never stand and say the words out loud, but through her reactions, through her weary silence, she has already revealed more than she intended. She carried Jake's secret, not in testimony, but in guilt. Jake's past should have been enough to stop this tragedy before it began. But the system looked the other way. Neighbors looked away, and Rebecca herself looked away. Together, those silences became a wall that no child could climb. Emmanuel deserved better. He deserved safety, protection, and a chance to grow. Instead, his short life has become a lasting reminder of what happens when warnings are ignored, when justice is delayed, and when silence takes the place of courage. And so, as we close this chapter, one truth remains. Rebecca Haro finally revealed Jake's secret, not in words, but in the heavy shadow of guilt she could not hide. And now that guilt belongs not only to her, not only to Jake, but to every system, every neighbor, and every choice that failed to protect Emmanuel when it mattered most. Emmanuel's story is not just a case to be studied. It is a warning that silence costs lives. The court stayed silent. The neighbors stayed silent. Rebecca stayed silent. And together that silence became Emmanuel's tragedy. But silence doesn't have to win. If we keep asking questions, if we refuse to look away, then maybe the next Emmanuel will be spared. So I ask you, don't let this story fade. Share it. Speak about it. Keep Emmanuel's name alive. Because every time we raise our voices, we break the silence that protects abusers and endangers children. This is DetectiveMax. And here we don't turn away. We confront the silence. We ask the hardest questions. And we fight for the truth that others bury. Stay with us. Subscribe, join this community. And let's keep building a space where justice has a voice, and where silence will never again cost an innocent life.